Anthropic's changelog credits version 2.1197 with one change. Claude Sonnet 5 became the default model in Claude Code. That entry is a single line. Everything else, developers spent the week discovering. The part that changed how the tool actually behaves shipped a version earlier in 2.196, one day before. It arrived quietly. Then, a bigger headline landed on top of it within 24 hours. Claude Code is Anthropic's command line coding agent, a tool developers run in a terminal pointed at a code base for hours at a time. It ships point releases several times a week. Most changelogs get read by almost nobody outside the people who filed the bug in the first place. A changelog entry that isn't a model name rarely gets covered at all. Version 2.196 had roughly 20 of them, spanning the model picker, the session list, file handling, and a security gap in how the tool connects to external tools. Start with the model picker. Claude Code has offered a per session model choice for a while. Type a command, pick a model, work in it. Version 2.1196 added a setting above that layer. Organization administrators can now set a default model for their whole team from the org console. Anyone who hasn't manually chosen a model sees it labeled org default or role default if it's scoped to a job function instead of picking blind. For a team lead standardizing which model juniors run by default, that used to require a shared onboarding doc. Now it is one console setting. Next, session names. Every Claude Code session used to start with a generic identifier, a string nobody could recognize a week later. 2.1.196 replaced that with a readable default name generated from what the session is actually doing. Anyone running 4 or 5 sessions in parallel, which the tool now actively encourages, can tell them apart without opening each one. Then, file attachments. Paste or attach a file into a Claude Code chat, and the reference used to sit there as plain text. Now it's clickable. Command click or control click on Windows, and it opens directly in Finder or Explorer. Small, but it removes a context switch that used to happen dozens of times a session. The agent's view got the most changes, and most of them fix a specific complaint. Claude Code can run multiple sessions in the background. Call up Claude agents, and it shows every session as a row in one list. Getting there used to take two presses of the left arrow key from a foreground session. It now takes one, matching how background sessions already worked. Small, but it's the kind of inconsistency that trains people to stop trusting a shortcut. The bigger agents view fix addressed something that had been quietly undermining the whole feature. Completed sessions were flipping their status between done and needs your input. The same finished task showing two different labels depending on when you looked. That's now fixed. Stalled sessions, the ones actually waiting on a human, are labeled needs attention instead of getting lumped in with sessions that are simply finished. And when a background session's result mentions a pull request, that mention is now a clickable link instead of a wall of text you had to scroll to find. Underneath the interface, 2.196 shipped a security fix that didn't get a UI at all. Claude Code's MCP tooling, the protocol it uses to connect external servers from search tools to internal company APIs, had a gap. A repository could self-approve its own MCP servers through a committed settings file, and those servers would then spawn automatically the moment someone opened that repository, even if that person had never seen or trusted the repo before. That no longer happens. An untrusted workspace now shows a pending approval indicator, and the server stays off until a person clicks to allow it. A related fix closed off a second path into the same class of problem. MCP authentication had been requesting a connected server's entire scope catalog even when no scope was specified, which broke connections to self-hosted GitLab instances and other enterprise identity providers with an invalid scope error. That request is now scoped down to only what's needed. A cluster of smaller fixes only shows up if a person had already hit the bug. Waking a background job used to occasionally delete its entire conversation and rerun the original prompt from scratch. When the tool misread a real transcript as corrupted, that file is now set aside instead of deleted. A rate limit warning was flickering on and off, and its telemetry was overcounting whenever several requests landed at once. Background sessions were printing duplicate summary lines after a rejected structured output retry. Moving a session to a new directory with the no acd command could leave a ghost copy in the old directory's resume list. Pressing escape twice at an idle prompt had stopped opening the rewind menu, a regression from an earlier release. That's fixed too, though people who'd learned to use Ctrl plus C instead in the meantime can keep doing that. On Windows, running git diff or git grep through PowerShell had been reported as a failure Whenever the command legitimately exited with status 1, the same false alarm that hit egrep, fgrep, and any quoted search pattern containing a pipe character. All four now match how bash already behaved. Each fix on its own is narrow. Together, they describe a tool that had been quietly annoying its most active users for weeks, one small paper cut at a time. Background sessions also got sturdier in a way that's easy to feel. Long running commands used to die if the Claude code process itself was stopped, restarted, or updated mid task, a problem specific to Windows, where background shells were simply killed rather than handed off. That handoff now happens instead of the kill. A workflow kicked off before lunch survives an update pushed while it runs. A few more fixes round out the release. Voice dictation had been dropping spaces and occasionally triggering itself during fast typing. Both are fixed. The code review workflow merged 5 separate cleanup checks into one pass, cutting its token usage by roughly a quarter. A streaming watchdog now runs by default for every model provider, aborting and retrying automatically if a response stalls for 5 minutes with no data at all. A research feature called Deep Research had been misreporting failed verification checks as fully refuted claims instead of simply unverified, a meaningful difference for anyone using the tool's output to decide what to trust. And on Amazon Bedrock specifically, a command that shows how many tokens a conversation is using had been reporting 0 for every tool group. It now reports the real count. None of this shipped as a headline. It shipped as roughly 20 bullet points under a version number. Nobody was watching the day before a bigger one arrived and took over every conversation about the release. What's unusual is the gap between what got fixed and what got covered. The status flipping bug in the agent's view had been live long enough that people built workarounds around it, refreshing screens, double checking sessions marked done before trusting them. The MCP Security Gap meant opening an unfamiliar repository could silently hand it the ability to run background servers, a detail with real exposure for anyone cloning code from outside their own organization. Both shipped in the same release as read only conveniences like clickable file paths, with no distinction in the changelog between the two, no severity label, no separate security advisory, just one more bullet in a list of 20. For a working developer, the practical shift is this. Sessions are easier to tell apart, and organizations can lock in default models without a shared doc. The agent's view stops lying about which tasks are actually finished. Opening someone else's repository is measurably safer than it was a week ago. None of it required an update beyond the one most people already installed to get Sonnet 5. The pattern is likely to repeat. Anthropic ships Claude Code updates several times a week in a flat, undifferentiated list. A security fix reads the same as a keyboard shortcut, and neither is flagged any differently from a new model announcement. Nothing about the format tells a reader which version actually matters. Finding out means going looking for the version that isn't the one everyone else is discussing. As of July 1, 2026, all of it is live for anyone running Claude Code 2.11196 or later, which, a day after 2.1111197 shipped, is close to everyone actively using the tool. The features aren't hidden anymore. They just arrived one version before the number everyone was talking about. In a changelog most people stopped reading the moment they saw a new model's name at the top of it.